Okay, so what we'll do is we'll get started where we left off last time in terms of the, what's that? Oh, something to do. Okay.
No,
In terms of the optimization, yeah.
No, I circled the answer correct on this, but I filled it wrong.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
Yeah.
So we have, everybody will have to do an optimization job in terms of their molecules. And so let's get started with this in terms of our Gaussian calculations. This is, really the only reason you use Gaussian at the beginning is to find the minimum structure of a molecule. We're going to look at some of the other techniques beyond this because, well, for one thing, I know the students that came up through this program have already done optimizations and frequency calculations. And so I don't want y'all to have the exact same experience you've had already. So I want to bring it up a level, add a few more techniques for under your belt. And then those that are new to Gaussian, it's okay. We'll do the opt and free calculations, but then let's also add some new capabilities that will take you beyond what other people have had also in the past. But everything starts with this optimization. So you build the molecule. The first job you do is you go to the optimization step and you start setting up the calculation. So we have two jobs typically. We have an optimization and a frequency calculation. And you can come up here and select this job type here on the job type tab, opt plus freq, and that will do both, okay? It's kind of a pain to, well anyway, it'll do both. It's super easy. You can do it separately, but we'll actually learn that next time. Just, this is super easy. Select opt plus freq, and then you need to set up your basis set and theory and so on. You have the title tab. You can type anything in here. This is for your personal use. It's always good to put, since we're doing classwork, is to put your name here for sure. Name. The dates are taken care of the file in the file, output file. So you don't have to worry about dates, but definitely put your name here. Maybe 5381, the class number. So I can quickly search through in the future. If I want to find student work, I can find your calculations and so on. So that'll be helpful. Okay, so then there's this link 0 tab. We really don't have to edit anything on here, but this is, I just want to point out, this is where it tells the computer system what the checkpoint file is. We talked last time about the different file names. The checkpoint file is what holds all of the wave functions and molecular orbitals and everything like that. So it's a very important file. It's you give it the location of the nuclei, it will put the electron cloud together, calculate the energy. Well, when putting that electron cloud together, it has to put that information somewhere. So that information is stored in the checkpoint file. Then it moves the nuclei, takes that checkpoint file information, calculates a modification to the electron cloud, and saves it in the checkpoint file. Then moves. So the output file is showing the movement of the nuclei and some of the energies of the orbitals, but all the actual XYZ data on that electron cloud is in the checkpoint file. So if you're ever going to do things later, like surfaces, like a molecular orbital or electrostatic potential or a total electron density, like what's the shape of the electron cloud, guess what you need to open? You need to open the checkpoint file. So, okay, we talked about computational times. I skipped ahead to this one just to kind of show how crazy it was that a 2-week calculation in 2004 would have taken 1,500 years and 67. And that's due to both hardware and software. So this is the software. You don't have to write all this down. I'm just telling you. Software and hardware. And we've had improvements in both. Now, they still make supercomputers today, but a lot of times it's more of throughput. They're trying to make things parallel so you can send them onto different computers. And so that's handy. So what does Gaussian do? We put in the nuclear component. See, the black squares are manual activity. So we go in and we build the molecule manually on the computer, picking the locations of the nuclei. Then Gaussian calculates the energy, calculates the slope of the energy with respect to those nuclear positions. It calculates the forces on the atoms. And then it says, are we at a minimum? And if the answer is no, then Gaussian will move those nuclei downhill. So it calculates the slopes, the forces on the atoms, and it says, wow, these two atoms are too close. If I move it farther away, it's downhill energetically. So it changes the geometry and starts over. So this is the iterative process. It loops, and it'll go maximum of 99 steps. If you've got a molecule that's falling apart or whatever, then it won't go forever. It'll go 99 steps, and then it'll stop and have you check. You're like, oh, the calculation failed. We go in and look at the geometry and see what's happened. I had several of these fail over the weekend. I was trying to do the dihedral angle for dichloroethylene, and when I had it at 90 degrees, I was changing it with the Z matrix. Well, it just changed the chlorine. It left the hydrogen in the plane, and so it didn't like that structure, and the hydrogen popped off. And it's moving around, and then it died because it couldn't find the location of this free hydrogen looping around the molecule. And so it went up, 99 steps, and then stopped and said, "Are you sure we're okay?" And I looked, and I was like, "No, we're not okay. That's not the molecule I wanted." But most of the time, it finds its way to a minimum, and we end up exiting this loop to a frequency calculation. So again, if you're doing an opt-freq job, this is automatic. It will end that first calculation, go into the second calculation, the frequency calculation. And then it will calculate the vibrational frequencies. If there are negative vibrational frequencies, then you're at the top of a hill. So think about the roots of a parabola, okay? The vibrational levels are here in a parabola, and so if this is 0, then these are positive. But if you're at the top of a hill, so here's 0, and you're at the top of a hill, you can still put vibrational frequencies in that parabola, but they're negative. So a negative vibrational frequency indicates that you're at the top of a hill. Let's say you've got a molecule and there's an atom equidistant between the two. And if it vibrates along that axis, the energy goes down. So it's at a saddle point. Any other motion, it goes uphill, but in that particular motion, it goes downhill. And so we would have a negative vibrational energy or frequency for that particular motion, indicating that you're at the top of the hill. So you manually go in and reduce the symmetry. So I would change that molecule somewhat so that that atom or bend or angle can go downhill, and then start over. So when I reduce the symmetry, I do that manually. I give it a whole new set of nuclear coordinates and start the calculation again. So I'm trying to find that global minimum where everything is at the bottom of a well. So if I go through this again and I end up calculating the frequency and I have no negative frequencies, those are called imaginary frequencies as well. Then I have the optimized geometry and energy data. Now it could be a local minimum. It doesn't have to be the global minimum. And in a very complicated molecule, it would take way too long to find the global minimum. If you've got all these dihedral angles and you're trying to find the minimum with respect to all of those dihedrals, it can be quite a search. Okay, so then when we finish this optimization and frequency calculation, we can open that file. And in Gauss View, if you go to the open file dialog, this is something that you can do. You can watch the optimization. So right here, if you check this box that says read intermediate geometries, which again, it only applies if you have optimization output files. You check that box, open the log file. So you can see here the log file. That's what you want to look at the optimization. This is what you get. So here's, you see this up here. If you've read in the intermediate geometries, you get these little buttons up here. If you don't check that box, you just get the optimized molecule. Okay. So if you check that box, you get this. And you can also go to the results and click the optimizations option, and you get these different graphs. And look, this structure here corresponds to that point in terms of total energy, the norm of the gradient, meaning all the positive, making all the positive values positive, the maximum internal force, so that would be the forces on all the atoms. And you can see right now we're definitely not at an optimized geometry because there's a large force on all the atoms. There's a large gradient. There's a slope with respect to the atom positions. That's what generates the force. and then the total energy is high. But if we go and I'm going to play this. It's a little video. You can click that. You can click through the different structures. I'm clicking this little plus, the little up arrow. So you see, I started with the chlorines in an eclipse position, and then they start moving. And naturally, they move to something on the order of 60 degrees, something close to 60 degrees. So that's what I mean by watching the optimization. I put in, I knew it was a high energy. I knew the chlorines didn't want to be next to each other. And so I wanted to see that optimization. What do you think of that? It's cool, huh? Okay. And I like that you can see the energy changes over here. And it can go uphill in energy as long as it's reducing the force. So the force is what allowed it to hop over a barrier. And that was nice. Okay. So this kind of is the what do they call it? Newman projection. Okay. So here's our geometry optimization results. This is what we started with. So if you do an optimization calculation, you'll see at the beginning of the calculation these initial parameters. These are the initial guesses that I put in. Obviously, these are the carbon-hydrogen bond lengths. You see the bond length between 1 and 2. So that's R12, 1.07. After the optimization, it went to 1.09. So it lengthened a little bit. This 1.54 is between atom 1 and 4. Well, I don't see a 4 on here, so that must be this carbon back here. So that's the carbon-carbon bond. Started at 1.5 angstroms. It was a good guess. 1.54, it changed very little. These right here are the carbon-chlorine bonds. So they went from 1.76 up to 1.8. You see, all of these started out with the initial guesses of the valence shell electron pair repulsion theory, 109.5. That was the initial guess. And look at the variety of angles that we have here, after the optimization. And that was what we saw in terms of the primary thing. Watch those chlorine atoms. The very first thing they do to relieve the stress is to get the chlorines away from each other. Oops, let's go back. Let's try it again. Okay, so see the first step, those chlorines hop away, then they went too far and they came back a little bit. So that was, again, increasing that chlorine. Now, which one of these is the carbon-carbon-chlorine angle? Well, 128 would be 1, see, or 148. So 148 would be the angle here, and here's 148 right here. So it went from 109 to 112. Now this is a symmetric molecule, so this is probably the other one, right? And so that's 417. Sure enough, 417. So you can go in and you can see on the optimized parameters, if you have the labels turned on your atoms, you can pull the angles, you can pull the bond lengths, you can pull the dihedrals. I said that dihedral should be around 60 degrees between, so you help me, this is some class interaction here. How would I define the dihedral between the chlorines? What 4 numbers would I use? 7148. Do we have one similar to that? Yeah, we have one right here, 7148. Started out at it says 1. I thought I started at 0, but now it's 68. Okay, so it's not quite 60 degrees, but it's close, So isn't that cool? You got to know how to define a dihedral in order to read this, and so that's why I hit that so hard. Now you can do all kinds of things with this. You can map out these potential energy surfaces. You can do things with computational chemistry that you could never do in the lab. How are you going to hold a molecule in this position or that position and calculate its energy? Okay. Now, those of you, let's see, you're now deciding, many of you are deciding who you're working for, but I know that I think it's Kit Zoll's research does a lot with Gaussian and actually really calculating the changes in the angles and stuff, and pulling that information from Gaussian is really important. Okay, and then transition states and so on. Now the difference between the minimums, I've got thermodynamics here, we can calculate those. We can calculate, the delta H and delta G values. and the equilibrium constants from those differences. If we calculate the products, the optimized geometries for the products, and subtract the reactants, then we get our delta H's, delta G's, and delta and the equilibrium constants. They do pretty well in terms of bond distances. So these are bond lengths, and here's the errors for all these different kinds of bonds. And so now let's look at the frequency calculations. So I'm going to stop there.